Go ahead and tell me I was cruel. But first, ask yourself how long a woman should stay invisible inside her own marriage. I brought the energy, the clients, and the life into every room while my husband stood at the edge and called silence loyalty. When Amir came to the party, I did not see a threat. I saw a man willing to claim me in public. My husband only straightened his cuff and gave the small smile he used when he had no answer. By midnight, everyone would finally know which man I had chosen. My name is Elena Russo. I was 34 and I worked as a brand partnerships director, which meant I knew how to make people feel important. To be fair, I had spent years doing that for my husband while he stood beside me in quiet rooms and called his silence loyalty. I was not planning to humiliate him at the Northline celebration. I only wanted to speak honestly, announce that I was done pretending, and let people see that I had chosen a man who chose me back. My husband would probably straighten his left cuff and give the small smile he used whenever he had no answer. By the end of the night, everyone would understand why I had stopped waiting for him. Our marriage had not always felt empty. Every Sunday, we visited the same farmer's market near the river. My husband bought my coffee while I chose rosemary from an old woman who wrapped the stems in brown paper. We had done that since the morning after our courthouse wedding. Back then, we had almost no money and a marriage license bent at the corner because I carried it in my handbag. Later, my husband placed it inside a black frame with one dried rosemary sprig behind the glass. It stood on our living room shelf, and for years I thought that made it sacred. Still, meaning was not the same as attention. My husband remembered dates, receipts, passwords, and every practical detail that kept our life running. But when I lost the biggest campaign pitch of my career, he opened my presentation and showed me 7 mistakes. 7. I counted them twice while he explained how I could win the next account. He was right, of course. His advice helped me. It also made me feel like another problem he had solved before dinner. That morning, while I placed fresh rosemary in a glass, he asked whether something between us had changed. His voice was soft, careful. I told him work had exhausted me and that he was imagining distance because he analyzed everything. He asked whether that was why I kept turning my phone face down. I laughed and told him privacy was not guilt. He wanted an answer, but I heard another inspection, so I gave him nothing. He stood beside the table with a slim black folder under one arm, straightened his left cuff, and smiled. That smile irritated me because it looked like surrender. He had started carrying the folder everywhere before Northline's annual partner celebration. Inside were guest lists, seating plans, and notes in his small handwriting. I assumed someone important had handed him administrative work again. My husband handled compliance and contracts. He was useful in the background. I was the person clients remembered. My phone buzzed. Amir had sent 3 messages in 9 minutes. 3 messages, 1 missed call, then a photograph of flowers he planned to send to my office. He never allowed silence to sit between us. If I disappeared for an hour, he asked where I was. Tessa called that passion. She said jealousy meant a man feared losing something valuable. I believed her because Amir made wanting me look urgent. My husband made loving me look like another payment leaving his account automatically. He asked who was messaging. I said it was a vendor confirming event details. He asked whether the vendor was Amir. I told him Amir was useful for work and accused him of turning a name into a problem. My husband asked when I had started protecting strangers from him. I said he was being dramatic. He placed the black folder beside the framed marriage license. For 1 second, his finger touched the rosemary behind the glass. Then he picked up the folder and said he would see me after work. No argument, no demand. Just that same small smile. I watched him leave and decided his calm proved what I had been telling myself for months. He had stopped fighting because he knew he could not keep me. At the Northline celebration, I would stand before the people who knew my work, speak without asking permission, and show them that Elena Russo no longer needed a quiet husband to approve her life. The flowers arrived at my office before lunch on Monday, 12 white roses in a black box, with no card because Amir liked making me guess. Tessa watched me lift the lid and said my husband had probably never sent anything that dramatic. To be fair, she was right. My husband bought flowers when they were already on the grocery list. Amir sent them because he had been thinking about me, or at least that was how I chose to see it. I counted the roses twice, closed the box, and told the receptionist they came from a hotel vendor thanking me for a successful event. The lie came easily because it was close enough to my real work. Amir supplied music, lighting, and private performers for several campaigns. He also knew how to make every meeting feel like it existed only for us. That afternoon, I met him at a Northline hotel for a walkthrough. He stood near the lobby bar in a dark jacket, speaking loudly enough for people to notice him. When he saw me, he crossed the room without hiding his smile. He asked why I had ignored his messages the night before. I told him my husband had been home and that I could not answer every time he wanted reassurance. Amir said he was tired of being treated like a secret supplier. I reminded him that secrecy was part of the arrangement. His face changed for half a second, but then he touched the flowers printed on my phone case and told me he wanted more than borrowed hours. I should have found the pressure annoying. Instead, it made me feel chosen. My husband never demanded my attention. Amir acted as if a delayed reply was a personal loss. We walked through the ballroom while staff measured the stage. Amir kept suggesting bigger lights, louder music, and a private entrance for important guests. I agreed with most of it because I wanted the celebration to feel like my event. Then my husband entered the lobby carrying the same slim black folder. He did not look surprised to see us together. He only asked whether the walkthrough had been added to the official schedule. I told him it was a last-minute vendor meeting. Amir smiled at him and said some people knew how to make decisions without waiting for paperwork. My husband looked at Amir, then at me. He asked whether Amir would also be attending the partner celebration. I said the guest list was still being discussed. That was not true. Outside vendors were not invited, and I already knew it. Before my husband could answer, an older Northline director crossed the lobby and interrupted a conversation with two investors just to greet him. She called him Daniel, asked about his father, and said Evelyn expected his decision before Friday. A second executive joined them. Then the hotel manager came from behind the front desk and shook my husband's hand with both of his. 3 senior people in less than a minute. I watched them carefully because their respect did not match the quiet job I had assigned him in my mind. Still, compliance people often held information that frightened executives. Of course, they treated him politely. Amir leaned closer and asked why everyone acted as if my husband owned the place. I laughed and said Daniel handled problems nobody else wanted to touch. My husband heard me. He straightened his left cuff and gave that small smile again. I read it as discomfort. He finished speaking with the director, then asked me to walk with him toward the elevators. His voice stayed calm as he mentioned the previous Thursday. He said I had told him I was working until 10, but the parking system showed my car leaving at 7 with a second vehicle behind it. He asked whether Amir had followed me to the restaurant near the river. I accused him of tracking me through company systems. He said he had not searched for me. The parking discrepancy had appeared during a routine access review. What he wanted to know was why I had lied. I told him the dinner had been professional and that his suspicion was the real problem. He asked why a professional dinner required me to remove my wedding ring. My hand moved toward the ring before I could stop it. I said it had irritated my skin. He looked at the pale line around my finger and asked when irritation had started looking like freedom. That question stayed between us. I answered by saying he had no right to make me feel guilty for having a career and friends. It was moral ground I knew how to use. My husband did not argue. He straightened his cuff, closed the black folder, and said he would not ask about Thursday again. I heard defeat in that sentence. Amir saw something else. After my husband left, he asked whether Daniel always spoke like he already knew the answer. I told him Daniel liked appearing smarter than everyone around him. Then I opened the private guest list on my tablet, deleted the name of a catering assistant who had cancelled, and typed Amir Haddad into the empty space. One change. One invitation. One step closer to the night when I would stop hiding. The private sponsor dinner was held in a glass restaurant above the river, where every table reflected the city lights. I had arranged the seating myself. My husband sat across from me. Amir sat beside me, close enough that his sleeve touched mine whenever he reached for his glass. 8 guests, 4 Northline executives, 2 agency directors, Tessa, and the 3 of us. I counted everyone twice while the waiter poured wine because Amir's name was not printed on the official place card. I had written it by hand 20 minutes earlier. To be fair, nobody challenged me. People expected me to control rooms like that. Amir arrived late and made sure every person noticed him. He shook hands too firmly, spoke before introductions ended, and told the table that good events needed men willing to act without waiting for permission. My husband looked at him, then lowered his eyes to the menu. Amir asked me what I wanted to eat before the waiter reached us. When I mentioned the sea bass, he ordered it for me. My husband quietly reminded him that I disliked the lemon sauce served with it. Amir laughed and said people's tastes changed when they were given better choices. A few guests smiled because they thought it was harmless. Tessa looked down at her napkin. I placed my hand near Amir's glass and told my husband not to turn dinner into another list of things he knew about me. He said he was only trying to prevent me from receiving food I would not eat. I heard correction in his voice, not care. Amir said a woman should be allowed to surprise herself. That sounded more romantic than knowing which sauce I hated, so I thanked him. The conversation moved toward the Northline celebration. I described the rooftop lighting, the sponsor wall, and the speech I planned to give about the company's new public image. One executive asked whether Daniel had approved the final guest structure. I answered before my husband could speak. I said the creative side belonged to me and that Daniel handled documents after real decisions were made. The executive did not laugh. Amir did. He leaned back and said some men were built to lead while others were better at cleaning up details. My husband placed his fork beside his plate. Straight. Exact. Then he adjusted his left cuff. I knew that movement. It meant he had nothing strong enough to say. The silence gave me courage. I told the table my husband could study one choice for an hour, while Amir made 10 decisions before breakfast. This time, 2 people laughed. One was Amir. The other was my agency director, although his laugh ended quickly when he saw the faces across the table. My husband asked whether I truly believed speed made a man valuable. I told him confidence mattered more than endless caution. He asked if confidence included entering private events under another employee's name. Amir turned toward me. The question was calm, but I understood what my husband was doing. He wanted to reduce Amir to a guest list problem because he could not compete with him as a man. I said the original catering assistant had cancelled and no seat had been stolen. My husband asked whether the assistant's access badge had also been transferred. I accused him of trying to embarrass me over a technical detail. He did not defend himself. That made it easier to continue. I raised my glass and said some women became tired of living beside a man who behaved like a shadow. The words landed harder than I expected. Nobody lifted a glass with me. 3 faces turned toward my husband. 2 guests looked at the river. Tessa pressed her lips together and stopped smiling. Amir broke the silence by touching his glass against mine. He said shadows only existed because brighter people stood in front of them. I laughed. It was short, but loud enough for everyone. My husband did not look at Amir. He looked at me. His face stayed still, except for the muscle near his jaw. For 1 second, I saw something simple there. Not anger. Not fear. It looked like sadness. I refused to give it meaning. Sadness was easy when a man had ignored every warning before losing his wife. My husband called the restaurant manager over. He asked him to correct the guest record and preserve the full itemized bill, including the added seat and Amir's drinks. The manager nodded without asking questions. Amir whispered that my husband was hiding behind receipts because he had lost the room. I believed him. My husband straightened his cuff and gave the small smile again. Then he finished his water as if nothing had happened. His control irritated me more than shouting would have. After dinner, he asked me to wait near the elevators. Amir stayed several steps away, watching us. My husband said he wanted one calm answer. He asked whether I had invited Amir because of work or because I wanted him sitting beside me while I humiliated my husband. I told him nobody could humiliate a man who had enough confidence to defend himself. He asked whether that was what I had needed from him all these years. I said I needed a husband who made me feel chosen, not managed. His eyes moved toward Amir, then returned to me. He said public attention was not the same as being chosen. I told him that sounded like something weak men said when stronger men took what they wanted. My husband went quiet. He adjusted his cuff once more and walked toward the parking garage alone. Tessa followed me into the elevator but did not praise the toast. When I asked whether she had seen Amir silence the entire table, she said the table had not looked impressed. I told her she was becoming too careful. She stared at the floor numbers and said Amir might be pushing harder than I understood. I dismissed that because caution was contagious, and my husband had already spread enough of it through my life. At home, I found the framed marriage license on the living room shelf. Amir planned to visit the next evening, and I did not want him looking at proof that another man still had a place in my home. I opened my husband's black folder, placed the frame inside, and closed it. The dried rosemary scraped against the glass. Then I messaged Amir and told him the sponsor dinner had proved exactly what I needed it to prove. Evelyn Cho came to our apartment on Wednesday evening without calling me first. I knew her as one of Northline's senior executives, the kind of woman who could stop a meeting by placing her glasses on the table. She stood outside our door in a grey coat, holding an old metal access card between two fingers. My husband invited her in and asked whether she wanted tea. Evelyn said she would not stay long. She looked at me once, then handed him the card. The name Daniel Mercer was printed beneath a faded Northline logo. Under it was a title I could not fully read because his thumb covered the bottom line. Evelyn asked whether he was certain about the decision they had discussed. My husband said he was. She asked if he wanted another week. He told her waiting would not improve anything. I assumed they were talking about a compliance project or his father's old financial matters. Daniel had once worked more closely with Northline's senior team before family problems made him step back. To be fair, Evelyn had always treated him with more patience than his position deserved. Important people often became attached to reliable employees. She turned toward the living room shelf and stared at the empty space where our marriage license had stood. One frame missing. 2 fresh rosemary stems in a glass. 3 unopened messages from Amir on my phone. Counting kept my face calm. Evelyn asked where the frame had gone. I said I had moved it while cleaning. My husband did not correct me. Then she asked whether Amir Haddad would attend the rooftop celebration. The question was too direct. I told her Amir was only a supplier and had never been invited to a private Northline event. Evelyn held my eyes for several seconds before looking at my husband. No accusation, no warning. She simply said she hoped the guest list remained accurate this time. I wanted to ask what she meant, but doing that would make me look nervous. Instead, I smiled and told her my team controlled event access. Evelyn gave a small nod that did not feel like agreement. Before leaving, she touched my husband's arm and said she would support whatever he decided. He thanked her. I watched them from the doorway and decided she was behaving like a former supervisor who still believed Daniel needed protection. After she left, my husband carried the old access card into his study. I followed him because I wanted to know what decision he had made, but he placed the card inside the black folder before I reached the desk. The framed marriage license was lying beside it. He had removed it from the folder. The rosemary behind the glass had shifted, and one dry leaf rested over my surname. My husband sat down and ran his thumb along the edge of the frame. He asked when I had become embarrassed by our marriage. His voice was not cold that time. It was tired. Simple. For a moment, I remembered the courthouse steps, the brown paper around the rosemary, and the cheap coffee we shared because the cafe had closed its kitchen. That memory made the room too quiet, so I told him I was not embarrassed. I said the frame did not belong in every conversation. He asked why I had hidden it before Amir came to our home. I said Amir had stopped by to discuss an event. My husband asked whether event meetings usually ended after midnight. I told him he was trying to create a scandal from ordinary work. He looked at the frame again and asked me to stop giving him explanations designed for strangers. That irritated me because it sounded like he believed he knew me better than I knew myself. I changed tactics. I sat across from him and admitted that Amir made me feel noticed. I said there had been messages and private dinners, but nothing as serious as Daniel imagined. It was not a full confession. It was enough truth to make me appear brave. My husband listened without interrupting. Then he named the pattern. He mentioned the evening parking record, the roses delivered to my office, the changed restaurant seat, Amir's added event access, and the expenses I had placed under Northline campaigns. 5 details. 5 separate things I had treated as invisible. I asked how he knew about the hotel records and the access changes so quickly. His eyes moved toward the old card inside the folder. For a few seconds, the pieces almost formed something I did not want to examine. Senior executives greeted him first. Evelyn asked for his decisions. The hotel manager followed his instructions without checking with anyone. My husband understood systems that should have belonged to people far above him. I reached toward the card, but he closed the folder. Of course he knew those systems. Compliance was his job. That explanation returned everything to its proper place. I told him his coldness had created the space Amir entered. I said he had spent years correcting my work instead of asking what I needed. My husband did not deny it. He admitted that he often solved problems because feelings made him uncomfortable. He said he had treated silence as peace and assumed providing for me was enough. His agreement gave me control again. I told him that recognizing his mistake did not repair it. He asked whether I wanted to repair anything. I said I wanted room to decide who I was without being managed. He straightened his left cuff and smiled, but the smile was smaller now. He said I would have all the room I asked for. The next morning, my agency director removed me from a Northline planning call and said the client wanted fewer people involved. Tessa took 6 hours to answer a message she usually answered in 6 minutes. Amir, however, sent 11 texts before lunch. He wanted to know why Evelyn had asked about him. I told him it meant people were finally paying attention. Then I opened my speech for the rooftop celebration and added a new final line. I would not only announce that I was leaving my husband, I would introduce Amir as the man who had reminded me what courage looked like. The rooftop greenhouse looked exactly the way I had planned it. Warm lights hung between steel beams, the glass walls reflected the city, and the Northline logo stood behind the small stage where I would give my speech. More than 60 guests moved between white tables with drinks in their hands. Hotel directors, investors, agency leaders, and people whose names could open doors with one phone call. I knew most of them. At least, I believed I did. My husband arrived before me in a dark suit, carrying the same black folder. He spoke briefly with Evelyn near the entrance, then handed the folder to her. She placed it beneath the registration table without opening it. To be fair, I assumed he had finished whatever administrative task Northline had given him. He looked ordinary beside the senior executives surrounding him. Quiet. Useful. Easy to ignore. My agency director greeted me but did not mention the planning call I had been removed from. 2 colleagues who normally stayed near me moved toward another table after saying hello. Tessa stood beside the bar, checking her phone. I asked whether she had read the final version of my speech. She said she had, but her voice lacked the excitement I expected. I told her the ending would make people remember me. She asked whether announcing the end of my marriage at a company celebration was necessary. I said people respected honesty when it came from a confident woman. Tessa looked toward my husband and said confidence did not always require an audience. I reminded her that she had encouraged me to stop living invisibly. She said she had encouraged me to make a decision, not turn it into entertainment. Before I could answer, her eyes moved toward the elevator. Amir had stepped out. He wore a black jacket and the expression he used whenever he thought someone had kept something from him. I had sent him the address but told him not to come until after my speech. 7 messages, 4 missed calls. One final message saying he was tired of following my rules. I counted them while he crossed the room. Tessa picked up her coat. I asked where she was going. She said she did not want to be part of what was about to happen. Then she walked toward the elevator without waiting for my response. Amir reached me and asked why I had ignored him all afternoon. I told him I had been preparing the most important speech of my career. He said I always had a reason to place him second when my husband was nearby. I reminded him that this was a private business event and that his name was not on the final list. Amir said I had promised he would no longer be hidden. Several people turned toward us. My husband approached slowly and asked Amir to leave before the situation became worse. Amir laughed and said the situation already existed because Daniel refused to accept that his wife wanted another man. My husband looked at me, not him. He asked whether I had invited Amir. I said I had shared the location because I planned to introduce him after my announcement. My husband adjusted his left cuff. His small smile appeared, calm and almost tired. I read it as surrender. He asked me to leave the rooftop with him for 10 minutes so we could speak privately before I said something permanent. His offer was simple. No demand, no threat. I refused because leaving with him would make me look afraid. I told him he had spent years deciding what was practical for me without once asking what I needed. He solved my problems before I finished explaining them, then expected me to call that love. My husband did not argue. He said I was right about that. He admitted that he had often treated feelings like problems that required answers. For a second, the honesty made Amir's performance look childish. I closed that thought before it could weaken me. I told my husband that recognizing his failure now did not erase the years when I had felt invisible beside him. He asked whether public humiliation would make me visible or simply make us both smaller. I said at least Amir was willing to show people that he wanted me. Amir stepped closer and announced that Elena needed a man who would fight for her, not a husband who hid behind polite questions. My husband asked him once more to leave. Amir said Elena belonged with him. The words reached the tables nearest us. I did not correct him. Instead, I told my husband that he should listen because Amir had the courage to say what Daniel never could. My husband became quieter. I became louder. That difference made me feel powerful. He said he would handle everything properly after tonight and that he would not ask me again. I heard final defeat in his voice. I searched the room for Tessa, expecting her to see that I had finally chosen myself. She was gone. I sent her one message, then another, then a third. None received a reply. Amir demanded that my husband admit the marriage was finished. Daniel said he would not discuss his marriage with a man who had entered a private event under another person's access. Amir's face tightened. He accused Daniel of speaking like an employee hiding behind rules. Then he stepped forward and slapped my husband across the face. The sound cut through the greenhouse. Conversation stopped. My husband's head turned slightly. His cheek reddened. Nobody moved. Amir placed one hand around my waist and said the slap proved which man was willing to claim me. A nervous laugh escaped my mouth. I let it grow because silence would have looked like doubt. My husband slowly turned back toward us. He straightened his left cuff. Then he smiled. My husband did not touch Amir. He did not raise his voice. He looked toward Marcus Bell, the hotel manager, and asked him to secure the elevator and record the names of everyone who had witnessed the assault. Marcus answered at once. 2 members of hotel security moved toward the doors. Amir's hand slipped away from my waist. I kept holding my glass, but my fingers had become wet against the stem. My husband turned toward me. The red mark across his cheek made his smile look wrong, yet he remained calm. He asked whether I remembered the first time I laughed because senior executives interrupted their conversations to greet him. I said nothing. He reminded me of the old Northline access card Evelyn had returned, the guest lists inside his black folder, the restaurant manager who preserved Amir's bill, and every hotel employee who followed his instructions without asking for approval. The details came back in the order I had dismissed them. My husband explained that he had not worked for Northline as a minor compliance employee. He and Evelyn had created the company before our marriage. When his father became ill, Daniel stepped away from public leadership but kept control of the group's property, risk decisions, and largest private share. The rooftop beneath us belonged to a Northline hotel. So did the restaurant where I had called him a shadow. The people watching us were not his co-workers. They were his partners. Evelyn walked toward him and stood at his side. She confirmed that Daniel Mercer remained Northline's controlling shareholder. Nobody looked surprised except Amir and me. I set my glass on a table, but my hand stayed around it. My husband continued. He said the first hotel account that made my agency notice me had come after he personally asked Marcus to give me an opportunity. The next 2 accounts came through Evelyn. Other partners followed because Daniel had trusted my ability and attached his name to mine. I had done the work. He did not take that from me. But the doors I claimed to have opened alone had already been unlocked by him. To be fair, I tried to defend myself. I told the room Daniel was using his position to punish his wife for choosing another man. Marcus faced me and said Northline had not acted because of my marriage. He said I had changed private guest records, charged Amir's expenses to company campaigns, shared restricted access, and brought an unauthorized supplier into an event where he assaulted a company owner. His voice contained no anger. That made the words impossible to fight. My agency director stepped away from me and joined Evelyn near the registration table. 2 colleagues followed. The room had made its decision without anyone announcing it. Amir looked at me and demanded to know why I had described Daniel as an unimportant employee. I told him that was how Daniel had always presented himself. Amir said I had promised the marriage was finished and claimed I controlled the Northline accounts. He moved toward the elevator without taking my hand. Security stopped him and directed him toward a private office where the assault would be documented. He did not look back. I searched for Tessa again. Her coat was gone. My messages still had no reply. My husband opened the black folder Evelyn handed him. He removed the framed marriage license and held it toward me. The dried rosemary rested behind the glass, with one brown leaf covering part of my surname. He said the frame belonged to me because he no longer wanted our beginning displayed in a home where it had become something I needed to hide. Then he told me that a separation petition had been prepared and that temporary control of the apartment would remain with him during the property review. 1 week later, I moved into a furnished studio near the airport, where the windows faced a parking structure instead of the river. My access to our shared business expenses was removed, and the salary I once spent freely had to cover every bill alone. Tessa stopped responding, while former friends began holding dinners at Northline restaurants without inviting me. Amir sent one message blaming me for misleading him, then blocked my number before I answered. My agency placed me on leave after Northline suspended every account connected to my team, and photographs from the greenhouse continued passing between clients who once greeted me first. I wanted a man who would claim me loudly because my husband's quiet love had made me feel invisible. Amir claimed me in front of everyone. Then he walked away when my name stopped offering him access. Daniel never said I belonged to him. He only removed his trust, and I finally saw how much of my life had been standing on it. The marriage license now rests on the windowsill of my studio, where the rosemary has turned completely brown. I spent years demanding to be seen, and now every important person in my life remembers the exact second I laughed.